What's up guys, it's MTG Matt for you. Today I want to take a look at the first Kaldheim spoilers slash leaks. There have been already some spoilers from like a few weeks ago, and every now and then a new leak also gets to be released through, various people on the internet basically. And that is all before the actual official spoiler season starts, before January 7th. So I thought, why not take a look at the cards that seem to be most relevant from the spoilers and leaks so far. I've reduced the cards I'm going to show you here to 24, since there were already shown more cards, but I want to focus on the most important ones in my view, and I also want to try to keep this video quite short and crisp. So without further ado, let's just jump into those cards. And I'm looking at these cards here on Mythics spoiler, by the way, just so you know. I'll give you a link in the description so you can look them up yourself. But let's start off here with Canopy Tactician. So this card indicates there's going to be an elf tribal theme in the set, as far as I remember correctly. There's also supposed to be an elf tribal planeswalker in the set, which is yet to be revealed. So Canopy Tactician, 4 mana 3/3 elf warrior in green, has a lord effect. Other elves you control get +1/+1, and you can tap it to add triple green. So we have a lord effect at 4 mana. This is quite late of a lord effect. Lord effects usually you can usually find them at 2 to 3 CMC. This is pretty late in the curve with 4 CMC. However, you also get a big ramper at the same time. So I suppose if there's an elf tribal deck, this is going in there, because you play this on turn 4, can have an aggressive turn 4, and then on turn 5 you can, just pump out something big for a lot of mana. So it seems pretty solid. Same goes for Elven Ambush, which supports this elf tribal theme. 4 mana instant, also in green. Create a 1/1 with green elf warrior creature token for each elf you control. So very, very powerful, especially since this is at instant speed. So you can just build up your board until turn 4, hold the mana open, and then your opponent's end steps basically flash this in. And this way, create a huge board of elves and then overrun your opponent. So if there's going to be a good elf tribal deck, this is also going to go in there. Next up, now we will come to juicy cards. Showdown of the Skalds. Sagas are back. I'm really excited about it. I'm a huge fan of sagas. I think they how could you say, provide a lot of spice to the gameplay, and just I really like them. And what I noticed, this saga here, for example, is multicolored. So far I think we only had monocolored sagas. Now we get multicolored sagas. This one is in Boros colors. First lore counter. Exile the top 4 cards of your library. Until the end of your next turn you may play those cards. Now, we already have seen a similar effect with Escape the Wilds, which got banned, which basically had the same effect, except it allowed you to play an additional land, which this doesn't have, obviously, in Boros colors. But it's still very, very good, right? It's 4 mana, draw 4. And the effect doesn't end there, because the lore counters 2 and 3 provide you basically with the emblem for the turn. Whenever you cast a spell this turn, put a 1/1 counter on target creature you control. So obviously you play this card for the first lore counter, because in an aggressive deck, paying 4 to draw 4 at sorcery speed is still absolutely amazing. Really gives you a lot of fuel, lets you play additional lands, and while I think in 99% of cases you won't be able to play all of those cards you draw until your next turn, it still provides you with a lot of fuel, and in an aggressive deck you don't care about these cards getting exiled. And then lore counters 2 and 3 are just a nice upside. So maybe this can go in like Boros Warriors, or really like any Boros aggro deck. This is really, really nice, and I think it's going to be a powerful card to look out for. Next up, Pyre of Heroes, an artifact, 2 mana. You pay 2 mana, tap and sacrifice a creature, and then you search your library for a creature card that shares a creature type with the sacrificed creature, and has converted mana cost equal to 1 plus that creature's converted mana cost. Put a card onto the battlefield and shuffle your library. Activate this ability only anytime you could cast a sorcery. Very interesting card for tribal decks. What comes to mind is Cleric tribal decks. Cleric tribal decks is already like a tier 3 deck right now. And I think Pyre of Heroes would fit really well in there because first you like the sacrifice effect just by itself. That's already beneficial in a Cleric deck. And then lets you find those key 3 or 4 drop pieces that really get your deck going. So I'm thinking Cleric tribal. This might be really nice in there. Also, if you think about Winota decks consist of mostly humans. So what could be a nice play pattern is turn 1, 2, and 3. Play your, or basically turn 1 and 2, play non-human creatures / tokens. Turn 3, play a human creature. And then turn 4, play Pyre of Heroes. Sack the 3-drop human creature immediately for a total of 4 mana. And get your Winota out of the deck. So this could make Winota really consistent, which sounds great. And this is one of those things you just need to find out in gameplay whether it's good. Another thing I would like to note is, which we're going to see later in the other cards I show you, is that Changeling is back with this set. So if you sacrifice a Changeling, as far as I know about Magic rules, you can then basically search for any creature card in your library because Changeling is every creature type, right? So this is a nice card to look out for. Next up, Starnheim Aspirant. Another tribal theme we might get in Kaldheim is Angels, as indicated by this 3 mana 2/2 human cleric. Angel spells you cast cost 2 less to cast. So this is a huge mana reduction. And if you're playing Angel, you want this card. And especially since this is 3 CMC, it plays real well with this Valkyrie Harbinger. 6 mana 4/5 Angel Cleric with flying and lifelink. At the beginning of each end step, if you gain 4 or more life this turn, create a 4/4 white Angel creature token with flying and vigilance. So you get very powerful Resplendent Angels for free, as long as you gain life. And if you see this mana curve, if you play the Starnheim Aspirant on 3, you can play the Valkyrie Harbinger at 4. Because apart from that, I think this is actually too costly to be playable in standard. But maybe, you know, if you have 4 Starnheim Aspirants in deck, maybe occasionally you get these huge powerful turns that you push this out on turn 4. And then you have a 4/5 flying lifelinker. So the nice thing about Valkyrie Harbinger is that it already provides you with that life gain on your turn to create that angel for free. So yeah, I doubt that it's going to be playable in standard because of its mana cost, but if you're playing Angel Tribal, you probably want to have this card. Next up, we got Magda Brazen Outlaw, legendary creature dwarf berserker, 2 mana 2/1. Other dwarves you control get +1/+0. Now you might notice there's a lot of tribal themes going on in this set, a lot actually. This is a dwarf lord, in a sense that it pumps the attack. It's also berserker, which is also a tribe that's going to be pushed in the set, so you know, a lot of experimentation going on with the tribals here. And it says, whenever a dwarf you control becomes tapped, create a treasure token. So, important here, when it becomes tapped, it doesn't say when it attacks. Because, you know, when your creatures attack, they tap, so you create treasure tokens, but you can also tap your creatures with vehicles, for example. Which is, by the way, also going to be another theme in the set. So, create treasure tokens, really nice. If we get like a really good 1-drop dwarf, for example, you can play this on turn 2, swing, or automatically have some ramp in a red aggro deck, which seems really nice. And then she has an activated ability, sacrifice 5 treasures, search your library for an artifact or dragon card, put that card onto the battlefield and shuffle your library. So, artifact card, you can search up your Embercleave with this card. Dragon card, I hope there are going to be more dragons in the set, but just from the dragons we have in standard right now, we have Terror of the Peaks. We have this 3-mana dragon from M21 that has some synergies with treasures. I forgot the name. Let's actually look it up. M21 dragon treasure. Yeah, it's can you guys see that? Actually, let me quickly move the camera. Good idea. So it's Garruk's Crown Scourge, 3-mana 5/4 with flying. Can attack unless you control 4 more artifacts. And at the beginning of your end step, create a treasure token for each non-token creature that died this turn. So this could be something to... Where were we? This could be something to look... go get with Magna Brazen Outlaw, but Terror of the Peaks is probably even better. So I really like this card, seems pretty powerful, has a lot going on for itself, and yeah, watch out for this card in a red aggro deck. Then Realmwalker. As I said, Changeling is back, 3-mana 2/3 Shapeshifter. As Realmwalker enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. You may look at the top card of your library anytime. You may cast creature spells of the chosen type from the top of your library. So, it's a changeling, you can put this in any tribal deck that plays green, right? But I don't think this card is particularly great in standard. Just plain, it's a 3-mana 2/3, which is, you know, it's a pretty big tempo loss these days if you just play this. And it can provide you with the occasional, you know, cast a creature from top of your library. So this is, I think this is the same effect as Vivian the Planeswalker has. But I don't see this card being played a lot, because even if it occasionally gets you 1 or even 2 cards, I think if you play this in an aggressive creature deck, you just have too much of a tempo loss to make up for the advantage. Or make up for the disadvantage. So I'm not particularly convinced by this card. Next up, we got Halvar, God of Battle. So this is a, how do you call them, dual modal card. We know them from Zendikar Rising. And we know them as those dual lands, or those lands that are, you know, a spell on the other side. And now for the first time, so first of all, these dual model cards are back, which I think is really, really great. And now for the first time, it's actually on a creature/artifact. So this is the first one. So let's take a look. Halvar, God of Battle, it's a 4-mana 4/4 legendary creature god. It says creatures you control that are enchanted or equipped have double strike. At the beginning of each combat, you may attach target aura or equipment attached to a creature you control to target creature you control. So, on face value, this is 4-mana 4/4, which is just fine. And if you play this in an aura or equipment heavy deck, all your creatures get double strike, which is a pretty powerful effect. However, you know, those equipment decks or aura decks always have this downside that if you don't have creatures, all those auras and equipments are basically useless. But that's why I think that Halvar is really great in that regard, because if you put 4 of him in a deck, you can always do something, you know. If you have equipment but don't have a creature, play him as a creature. If you have creatures but no equipment, play the equipment side. So, because of his flexibility, there's always going to be a play here. And then he has, you know, this combat trick, so to say, which could be neat in a way, but I think it's basically negligible. So the important part about Halvar is the part that gives your creatures double strike, which is really nice. And then that you can play it as Sword of the Realms, which is the other side of the card. 2-mana legendary artifact equipment. Equipped creature gets +2/+0 and has vigilance. And whenever a equipped creature dies, return it to its own hands owner's hand, and it has an equip cost of 1 and white. So this equipment is obviously not super great, although I want to say that Vigilant is, in general, I would say a pretty, how do we say, like, pretty underrated keyword. And yeah, the good thing about this card is you don't have to play it as an equipment, you can play the creature part, so there's always something to do. And then if you play it, if you play it in an aggressive deck, it provides you with additional resources, because when the equipped creature dies, you get it back to your hand. And the equip cost is pretty low at 2. So I don't think this card is super busted or anything, but I think it's certainly going to find its place in some decks. And I really like the design of this card. Let's move on, I don't want to make this too long. Alright, Kaya the Inexorable. Planeswalker in Ores of Colors. 5 mana with 5 loyalty. +1, put a ghost from counter on up to 1 target non-turn creature. It gains when this creature dies or is put into exile. Return to its owner's hand and create a 1/1 white spirit creature token with flying. Right away, this +1 ability isn't great. If you don't have a creature on the battlefield, it just does nothing. But this might find its place in Yorion decks, right? You're happy to have your Yorion come back to your hand to play it again. Get your Yorion effect again. And especially since it's said when the creature dies or is put into exile. So you're also protected from, for example, extinction events to protect your Yorion. So it might see some play, but the main reason you play this card is the -3 exile target non-land permanent. This is the premium removal out there. It can exile anything apart from lands. So playing this at 5 mana, going -3 seems pretty powerful. And it competes with Elspeth Conqueror's Staff. But this can obviously provide you additional value over the next few turns. And I could see this being played, in Yorion decks as a one-off, maybe. And then let's take a look at the -7. You get an emblem with, at the beginning of your upkeep, you may cast a legendary spell from your hand, graveyard, or from among cards you own in exile without paying its mana cost. So obviously the -7 is pretty powerful. You get a free spell return. There is this restriction that it must be legendary. But the great thing is you can play it from anywhere, hand, graveyard, or exile. And the great thing about the emblem is that Kaya can recast herself, right? So if she gets destroyed and you have the emblem going, you can just get her from exile, from graveyard, from anywhere. And you can just keep exiling permanents of your opponent. Yeah, but it's fair to say that emblems don't happen that often, obviously. So what do I think about this card? I don't think it's super great. I think the -3 has obviously its uses. The +1 is rather weak, I would say. The only thing that comes to mind, as I said, is Yorion deck. And the -7 is pretty juicy, but it's an ultimate, and that's why it will rarely happen in games. So all in all, I would say this is just a solid Planeswalker, but I think it won't find its way into a lot of decks, but if it does, it's definitely going to do some work. Okay, next is Sarulf Realmwalker. I think there was a lot of talk about this card, so let's read through it first. It's a 3 mana 3/3 legendary creature wolf. Whenever a permanent opponent controls is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, put a 1/1 counter on Sarulf Realmwalker. Failed passages, for example. At the beginning of your upkeep, if Sarulf has 1 or more 1/1 counters on it, you may remove all of them. If you do, exile each other non-land permanent with converted mana cost less than or equal to the number of counters removed this way. Now, unfortunately, this card is probably not great. And here's why. When I first saw this card, I was like fantasizing about, oh my god, it's so cool, I'm going to build a Sarulf control deck that exiles all of my opponent's stuff every turn, and I'm, winning somehow. It's some way else, basically. But here's the thing. when it comes down, it's just a 3-mana 3/3, which doesn't do anything, right? So your opponent can sacrifice their passages, and then you know, this gets the 1/1 counter, but it doesn't do anything by itself. And then the important thing to say is that if you want to use its upkeep trigger, you have to put 1/1 counters on the creature before your upkeep, so your opponent's end step. Because if it doesn't have 1/1 counters on your upkeep, it doesn't trigger. So it's not like you can, on your upkeep, instant speed put counters on it. It doesn't work that way. So the upkeep trigger is hard to activate, and that's why it's rather hard to get this card going. Obviously dies to any removal. But just in my opinion, I actually like this card because I like cards which have this potential on them, but which seem really bad. And these are the kind of cards that I want to make work. So my objective opinion is this card won't work out. And my subjective opinion is I actually like this card and I'm really looking forward to try to make it work. Okay, now we're getting to the leaks basically with Arni Brokenbrow. 3-mana 3/3 haste. Legendary creature human berserker in red. Has the new keyword ability Boast. So how does Boast work? We have a rules text here. Activate this ability only if this creature attacked this turn and only once each turn. So Boast means if a creature has Boast, it has an activated ability, and it may only activate its ability if it has attacked on your turn, and you may only activate it once per turn. So Arni Brokenbrow has the activated ability of 1. We pay 1 mana. You may change Arni Brokenbrow's base power to 1 plus the greatest power among other creatures you control until end of turn. Okay, so let's take a look at this. 3-mana 3/3 with haste. It's not great, but it's fine, right? So it's a haster, so as I said, it's not great, but it's playable. You know, hasters with this baseline of power and toughness, they are just playable. And then, let's say you play this on turn 4, you can immediately use the activate ability and pump this up really hard. And what comes to my mind is you could play on turn 4 your Annex, right? Your Annex, which then has like power of 4. And then on turn 4 you play Arni Brokenbrow. Your Annex Hardened Forge has like 5 power. You attack and you use the boss ability of Arni, and then he becomes a 6/3 with haste. Now, this seems pretty good, but remember that on turn 4 you usually want to play your Embercleave. So I don't think this card is bad, but I think this card falls victim to the fact that the mana curve in mono red and standard right now is just the way that you have your turn 3 Annex, for example, and turn 4 you want to play your Embercleave. And this gets in the way of that, and this doesn't replace an Annex. So I think it's a solid card, but I don't think it's going to see a lot of play. Next up, oh my god, it's already 24 minutes. Next up, Battle for Breeder Guard. Another saga in Celestial Colors. 3 mana. First lore counter. Create a 1/1 white human warrior creature token. Okay. Second lore counter. Create a 1/1 green elf warrior creature token. Fine. Third lore counter. Choose any number of artifact tokens and or creature tokens you control with different names. For each of them, create a token that's a copy of it. So, this card is terrible. Just the baseline, what you get, with the first and second lore card, you get 2 1/1s for 3 mana. And not even immediately, but you get it at sorcerer speed and delayed. So that's already really, really bad. And then if those survive, which you don't even know, you can double them and any artifact tokens, right? To be fair, we don't know anything about other token support in the set yet. And obviously Selesnya is the premier color combination for tokens. But I just don't see a deck where this card is going to go off and where this third lore counter is going to give you a huge payoff. Even if you have a treasure token, you can just you can just copy one of them because you all need to have different names. So I just don't see how this card is going to be good. Next up, Blessing of Frost. It's a snow sorcery. Snow is coming back to standard. Snow permanence. 4 mana. Distribute X 1/1 counters among any number of creatures you control, where X is the amount of snow spent to cast a spell. Then draw a card for each creature you control with power 4 or greater. So let's go through this. Pay 4 mana, and if all of that mana is paid with snow permanence, you can distribute 4 1/1 counters among any number of creatures you control. And obviously you can distribute them in a way that you have as many creatures with power 4 or greater as possible, right? So that you then draw a lot of cards. But I don't think that's going to happen. I just think at 4 mana you'd rather have, I don't know, a questing beast, for example. I just think this card is too weak, and this draw card aspect, realistically, I think, let's say on turn 3 you've played your Lost-Struck Beast, right? And what else do you have on board? I don't know, you have like a 2 power Stone Cold Serpent on board. For 4 mana you can, you get 4 additional power on the board and draw 2 cards. I'd rather have a questing beast, so I don't think this card is going to see play. Ooh, next up, this is a juicy one. Now, I want to put a disclaimer out there. These are not official spoilers, so there's always a chance that, these are trolls on the internet who make up these cards, but just from my experience from past spoiler seasons, almost all leaks and spoilers were basically always correct, so we're just going to assume that these are actually cards that are going to be in the set. So here we have Vorinclex, Monstrous Raider, 6 mana, 6/6, legendary creature Phyrexian Praetor, with Trample and Haste. If you would put 1 or more counters on a permanent or player, put twice that many of each of those counters Put twice that many of each of those kinds of counters on a permanent or player instead. If an opponent would put 1 or more counters on a permanent or player, put half that many of each of those kinds of counters on a permanent or player instead. Round it down. So, okay, let's go through this. 6 mana, 6/6 with Trample and Haste. That's playable. High mana cost, but it has an immediate impact on the board. It's absolutely playable. And then the first part is the replacement effect. So I would assume if you play Planeswalker with these, they come into play with double their loyalty counters, which I would guess for basically all Planeswalkers and standards, this means they can ultimate right away, which is sick, right? But that being said, it's 6 mana in green. You should basically win at this point, right? Otherwise, if you untap the next turn and play Planeswalkers, you really should win the game by the turn if they come in with double loyalty. And then the second part is interesting because at the end of the turn it says round it down. So if this is on the board, your opponent's sagas don't tick up, because every upkeep your opponent's sagas tick up by 1. Well, half of 1 is, well, half, and if you round it down, it's 0. So this is actually interesting because it prevents, sagas from triggering, and it prevents, it also prevents Planeswalkers from gaining loyalty if they only tick up for 1. So I really like this card if this card is real. Yeah, I can't envision right now what kind of deck this would go. Maybe you could play like a like a Sultai control deck, right? Where this is the top end together with some Planeswalkers, and you get a Trample Haster that can, you know, really close out the game. And then you have this added effect of, if you got Planeswalkers out there, you can really tick them up fast. Also with Sagas, right? Your Sagas, they double those counters, so they finish faster. So if this card is real, a lot of interesting implications, and I already love this card. It's pretty cool. Alright. Man, we're already at 30 minutes. Next we got Toski, Bearer of Secrets. 4 mana, 1/1 legendary creature squirrel. Awesome, we got legendary squirrel. I'm already hooked. This spell can be countered. Indestructible. Toski, Bearer of Secrets attacks each combat if able, and whenever a creature you control is combat to a player, draw a card. So, a lot of going on here. Notably, can be countered and indestructible. So this card is always going to hit the board. You can only interact with by bouncing it, exiling it, or having your opponent sacrifice it, right? But apart from that, it's a 4 mana 1, indestructible, and the main reason you would play this is for the, let's say, enchantment effect of whenever a creature you control this combat to a player, draw a card. And I certainly want to try out this card. I think this could go well maybe in like an Ozolith deck, right? Where you have the ability to pump this up with 1/1 counters. And it provides you with card draw in a green deck. Apart from that, I don't think you would put this into like a mono green aggro deck. And because I just think it doesn't do enough at 4 mana, you would rather want aggressive creatures. So it's an interesting card to look out for, but I'm not sure that it's going to fit any standard deck. Next we got another saga. It's the Bloodski Massacre. 3 mana in Rakdos colors this time. First low counter. Create a 2/3 red demon berserker creature token with Menace. Second low counter, whenever a berserker attacks this turn, you draw a card and lose 1 life. And third low counter, add red for each berserker you control. Until end of turn, you don't lose his mana as steps and phases end. So this speaks to Berserker Tribal, which is going to be Rakdos colors. Now that we see this, I assume. And I really like this saga. Just for the fact that the first low counter gives you a creature that fits with the tribal, and you have an immediate impact on the board. And 3 mana, 2/3 Menace, you wouldn't put this card into your deck if it was a real standalone card. But I think in a Berserker Tribal, you can really just put 4 of these at the free CMC spot, and basically have 4 suboptimal free drop creatures in your deck for additional upside of the second and third lower counter. I think that's absolutely fine. A 2/3 with Menace is not great, but it's not bad either. It's pretty solid. And then this saga gives you card draw and kind of ramp. And let's say you play this on turn 3, right? Play this on turn 3, or you have 2 berserkers, or let's say even 1 berserker. With this you get a second berserker. On turn 4 you swing. And draw 2 or 3 cards, maybe. And then on turn 5 you can get up to 3 additional mana. And on turn 5 you basically untap with 8 mana. So this could be a play pattern where you where you close out the game at turn 5, and normally it gives you red, so this supports you playing Embercleave, so I think this card is really solid. Next up, Righteous Valkyrie. Oh boy, this card. 3 mana, 2/4 flying Angel Cleric. Whenever another Angel or Cleric enters the battlefield under your control, you gain life equal to that creature's toughness. As long as you have at least 7 life more than your starting life total, creatures you control get +2/+2. Note that this anthem effect includes the Valkyrie itself, so this is going to be a 4/6 with flying then. So mono white life gain is already a tier 1 deck right now, and I think this card is going to go in there and wreak even more havoc. With all this upside, you also get a 3 mana 2/4 flyer, which in mono white life gain you can put 1/1 counters on it, pump it up, and then it gives you a huge emphatic effect. +2/+2. And it's not even legendary, you can have multiple of these on the board. So absolutely powerful card, especially considering the current meta, and look out for this card. Next up, Battle Mammoth. Now this card reveals another new mechanic, which is Foretell from the set. So before I read out this card, let's read out the mechanic first. So it says Foretell 2 green. During your turn, you may pay 2 and exile this card from your hand face down. Cast it on a later turn for its Foretell cost. So what is Foretell? So it's your turn. Let's say it's turn 2, right? You pay 2 colorless mana, and you exile this Battle Mammoth face down so your opponent can't see it. And then on any other turn, there's no time limit on when you have to do it. On any other turn, you can pay 4 mana and then play this Battle Mammoth for 4 mana instead of paying its regular mana cost, right? So I love this mechanic because first of all, the turn you play it, I would say it's a special action, right? So this can't be countered. You putting in exile can be countered. It's like cycling, I would say. And it's basically like an investment into the future because the Foretell cost, as you see on this card, is smaller than the actual mana cost, right? And your opponent doesn't know what's coming. That being said, if the meta settles, let's say after a month, players will usually know what the popular Foretell cards are, so they know what's going to come down. So I really love this for the fact that it creates this kind of minigame with your opponent and you can invest in later turns. I think that's really, really cool. And so let's take a look at the actual card. It's Battle Mammoth, 5 mana 6/5 with trample. And whenever a permanent you control becomes the target of spell or ability an opponent controls, you may draw a card. Yeah, I mean, this card is fine. It's not super amazing. If you play the Foretell cost, if you pay the Foretell cost, you can play this on turn 4. So for 4 mana you get 6/5 trample and its effect, which is pretty nice. And considering that right now there's so much black single target removal in the meta, this card will probably just replace itself, right? Because it comes down and then if your opponent wants to remove it, you immediately draw a card. But I'm not completely convinced that this card is going to make the cut in decks. I think it's actually too slow. Because if you play it on turn 4, remember, you had a dead turn 2. You sacrificed your whole turn 2 to where you could have played your Scavenging Ooze, for example. So I think this card is actually not great, but I really like the Foretell mechanic. Okay, we're coming close to the end. Dragonkin Berserker, 2 mana 2/2 human Berserker with first strike. And both abilities you activate cost 1 less to activate for each dragon you control. So here we have a mix of Berserker and Dragon tribal theme. And it's got the both ability of 5 mana, create a 5/5 red dragon creature token with flying. So I think this card is really, really powerful. I could see this play in just red aggro decks without any theme, because the 2 mana 2/2 with first strike is just solid by itself, right? And then the boss ability can really provide you with fluid later in the game. Turn 5, you get a 5/5 dragon, which is amazingly good. And this is also obviously very powerful card for a Berserker tribal deck. So I would assume this is going to be your go-to 2-drop in Berserker tribal decks. I'm not sure about this mix-up with dragons. But as we've seen with Magda, she is a dwarf berserker, which lets you search up dragons. So maybe Magda goes together with Dragonkin Berserker in one deck, together with some dragons, and then you have a really nice 2-drop right here. Next up we got Secret God Favored. 3 mana 2/2 legendary creature human warrior with flash, and first strike protection from god creatures. So gods are going to be also a theme in the set. And with Secret God Favored enters the battlefield, exile up to 1 target attacking or blocking creature until Secret leaves the battlefield. So, do I see this card being played? It's got flash, which has a huge upside, right? I don't know about this card. To be fair, it's removal on a stick, but your opponent has to attack or block. But I think let's say what if your opponent doesn't attack? You hold 3 mana open. Your opponent doesn't attack on his turn. You flash this in. You got a 2/2 with first strike and protection from god creatures for 3 mana. That's not great. So I don't think this card is going to see play. Yeah, I just don't think it's going to make the cut. Next I got Resplendent Marshal, 3 mana 3/3 Angel Warrior with flying. When Resplendent Marshal enters the battlefield or dies, you may exile another creature card from your graveyard. When you do, put a 1/1 counter on each creature you control other than Resplendent Marshal that shares a creature type with the exile card. Right away, my opinion about this card is that it's absolute garbage. Absolute garbage. Imagine this. Turn 3, you play this card. In a tribal deck, right? You have to play a tribal deck because otherwise the effect is just useless. The enter the battlefield effect. Turn 3 comes around, you play this. What is the likelihood that you're going to have a tribal creature card in your graveyard to exile with this? And even if you do, this means that you have only 1 creature on your board, because you played 1 creature on turn 1, played a second one on turn 2, then one of those died, you play this on turn 3, you exile the creature from the graveyard, and your payoff is that you put a 1/1 counter on your other creature. It's just absolute garbage. I hate this card. Really, I don't wish anyone to pull this card when he opens a pack. And yeah, maybe this is fake, but I don't know. It seems absolutely awful. Sure, it's a 3 mana 3/3 flyer, but the payoff is so little. I just don't see a world where this card would be great. I think to me it's absolute garbage. So last 2 cards here. And now this one is very interesting. Runeforged Champion. 3 mana 2/3 Dwarf Warrior. When Runeforged Champion enters the battlefield, you may search the library and or graveyard for a rune card. Reveal it and put it into your hand. If you search the library this way, shuffle it. And you may pay 1 rather than pay the mana cost for rune spells you cast. So right now we have no idea what rune spells are. It's going to be a new mechanic in the set. We just don't know what rune cards are. Maybe these are some kinds of, aura enchantment cards, but that's just a guess. No idea. But even without knowing what runes are, I think this card seems amazing. So first of all, it's a dwarf, so it can fit in some dwarf trial decks maybe. It's a 3 mana 2/3, so it doesn't die to storms or shocks, which is nice. It lets you search up a specific card, and it reduces mana costs. Now we don't know by how much, and since it says pay 1, I would assume maybe runes cost 2 mana, because anything above that would be pretty like a lot of mana reduction. And without knowing what runes are, I think this card looks pretty great. So let's watch out for this card. And last card we're going to talk about is Calamity Bearer, 4 mana 3/4 Giant Berserker. If a giant source in control would deal damage to a permanent player, it deals double that damage to the permanent or play instead. Okay, so it's a Berserker. It could go into Berserker deck, but giants also seem to be a sub-theme in this deck. There's so much going on in Kaldheim. And just by itself, when you play this at 4 mana and it gets to attack or block, it deals 6 damage. So it's a 4 mana 6/4 kind of, right? So that's pretty powerful. Disclaimer, this effect does not work with Bonecrusher Giant Stomp, right? Because Stomp is simply an instant. Yeah, this card is, we have to see if there are going to be more giants in the set which, you know, justify a giant tribal deck. In my opinion, just flavor-wise, giants need to cost a lot of mana, right? Because otherwise, how would they be giants? So, I can't really imagine that there are going to be 1 or 2 drop giants. So, as you see, this is a giant berserker. Maybe there's going to be a mix between giants and berserkers, and then this could occasionally go into a berserker deck, for example. So if that's a thing, this card seems powerful because it has an immediate impact on the board, right? While it can attack itself immediately, it pumps your other giants, which seems great. So this card might be good, but I'm skeptical. And yeah, I tried to keep it short. This is 45 minutes now, but we got through those 25 cards. And I hope you guys enjoyed it. Now watch out for January 7th. That's when the spoiler season starts. I'm really looking forward to Kaldheim. Can't wait to have some new content here. And I keep you guys updated. And hope you guys enjoyed the video.